I want to welcome Mike Newell and Luke Smellin, who are going to be, well, Mike is going to be interviewed by Luke, one of our Stars of Tomorrow this year. Mike needs probably no introduction, but his latest film, Prince of Persia, is opening worldwide now. So, Luke, take it away.
I just want to know how you started in the beginning, really. What made you want to do that?
Okay, everybody gets luck,
Yeah.
right? Nobody starts without luck. And the luck that was going around when I was the same age that you are was television. And this was at the beginning of the 60s, 1963, and BBC Two had yet to open. They hadn't started up yet. So they were recruiting in a major way. And then ITV had begun 3 or 4 years before, perhaps, and that phrase that haunted them for so long, which was that television was a license to print money, was still true. Simply was true, and it depended on the personality of the guys running the stations, who were just like the old fiefdoms. They were like Warner and all of those Hollywood moguls. And Lou Grade was one, and he was always sort of show busy. But the company that everybody sat up and took notice of was Granada. Okay. And they were owned and run by a guy called Sidney Bernstein, who had been, his family was wealthy in cinemas from the 1920s and 30s, and he had been a man about culture and had driven his own open-topped Bentley about Europe following culture. And it was an all-round kind of driving businessman, but cultural good egg, and he was connected like you wouldn't believe. And so it was like going to a kind of graduate school in a way. You know, we all arrived there. They took 6 nice young men from university. They sent scouts out and all that kind of stuff, and they saw. Well, then what they saw was student theatre, because there wasn't anything else. Okay. They didn't have. I mean, in my whole time at university, I think only one guy made one film. Apart from anything else, because it was very difficult and very expensive, because it wasn't actually. There was no kind of beady-eyed stuff about is you really good enough. Yeah. Mostly, I think it was to do with could you stand to have dinner with the guy.
Right.
And what I noticed was that we ranged from the nerdy to the kind of lunatic entertainer to the sort of seriously ambitious, get out of my way kind of a guy, and then just people who were very curious about the whole thing and who were kind of sort of bouncy. Because going to Granada at that stage was like going to graduate school. You know, there were, every 2 years they did an 8-man intake, 6-man intake, of whom they retained 4 or 5. Okay. And so they built up a layer of these young guys, all of whom had got the same kind of background. Sure. And were mostly trained in theatre, some in film, some in journalism, but mostly in the theatre, because as I say, that's what there was. They were a very, very good company to work for, because they were, quite frankly, openly. I don't know whether you'd say they were intellectuals, but they could cope with a higher level of academic input than a lot of TV companies could today. So the luck was being with this company at that time. It was a matter of time. As I said, the BBC was recruiting for BBC Two at that stage, and I went and saw them as well. But I can't tell you the emptiness of the field. Yeah. There were no film schools. Yeah. You had to go off and get a job. You couldn't get a job in films because those jobs were controlled by families. They ran in families.
Yeah.
So there were families of camera people, there were families of sound technicians, there were families of editors. As far as directors or writers were concerned, it was, I wouldn't have known where to go.
Yeah.
But those two jobs, the director and the writer, plus the researcher and the documentarist, were an absolutely daily need, necessity
Yeah.
in television at that time. They couldn't fill the schedules. They didn't have the shows to fill the schedules.
Yeah.
And I think what really characterized those times was the emptiness of the field and therefore the relative ease of getting a job, whereas I'm always horrified by how much you guys have to try. I really genuinely am.
It is.
We would not have survived. My lot would not have survived.
Does sound like there's an enormous difference, because nowadays it's like, I mean, the experience I had was, I studied screenwriting at university, so I didn't
Right.
actually go to film school, went to Bournemouth.
Right.
And one of the first things they said to us was, let's kind of manage your expectations. You're not going to be able to write a feature that's ever going to get made, so let's try and...
Never.
That's what they said to us. And that kind of, for me, the way I reacted to that was kind of like, almost with like, how dare they tell me that I'm not going to do that.
Well, certainly it is a question, yeah.
But coming out of university, the scramble for jobs and literally trying to find any job, as a sound recordist or as working on a website, editing or doing anything you can really to edge your way in there.
Yeah. They needed us almost as much as we needed them,
Yeah.
which simply is not the case anymore.
Yeah. And how about writing? Did you ever consider directing your own screenplays or writing?
I always thought that I was a rotten writer, but we should say this in front of the camera. Are you ready? Okay. I thought that I longed to be an actor, and I discovered that I was a very bad actor. And I had a curious relationship with writing in that I was fed straight in after about 4 months into a production mincer.
Okay.
And that meant that I had to, and this is another indicator of just how wildly different things are now, I had to be worth the small investment that they had made in me, the company had made in me, immediately. And so therefore I had to go to work, I had to direct shows.
Yeah.
Or if I had gone another way, I had to be an effective researcher. And so therefore I jumped straight into doing everything, magazine programs, children's programs, absolutely everything, and working very hard,
Yeah.
turning out a lot of unmemorable stuff. And only after a bit was I trusted with actors. And I think that they could tell very quickly. They would have been able to tell that there was one key thing about anybody that they selected.
Sure.
And actors, were they or were they not able to talk to them? Were
Yeah.
they or were they not scared of them?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I wasn't. I always wanted to be an actor. And so I've been interested in how it happened and what
Yeah.
sort of people did it. But of course what that also meant was that writing came to you when it did start to come, which was only after 2 or 3 years, because up to that point you weren't trusted with these major amounts. But the way that it worked was that once every 3 weeks this 50-page thing would fall on the desk and you would get on and do it.
Yeah.
And very quickly you got to look forward to certain writers. Oh great, I've got a Jack Rosenthal this week, or well, there's a kind of, there's a Peter Ridley. There never was a Peter Ridley.
Yeah. So did you look for something back then in the scripts, something specific that you latched onto as a director that you still find now that you?
Well,
is
no,
there something or?
I didn't, because simply it was understood that there wasn't a choice.
Yeah.
That I was going to do that 50 pages, whether good, bad or indifferent, I was going to do it, which of course was a wonderful training ground. As soon as I moved beyond that, then I began to recognize that there were certain things that I liked and certain other things that I didn't like. And I then began to be able to categorize what those things were. I would prefer that things were modern, and TV production would be all over the show in terms of, there would be huge adaptations of novels, and there would be modern drama, and I tended to do modern drama, but you had to be able to do everything. I remember doing adaptations of D.H. Lawrence short stories, adaptations of Hardy, as well as all the kind of ground up work. But simply you began to know what you liked, and you then began to speculate on what it was that you liked.
Yeah.
And I think that way you came to an education. And I think that when I got into the writing side of things on television, I started to do drama that I really loved. It was partly because the writers, I could see what they actually did. And
Sure.
I remember working for one wonderful producer and taking him a script that he had sent me and saying, I don't know, Peter, I don't know whether this, can this be done? He said, it's a pile of shit, isn't it? So look, what we'll do is, are you free this evening? So yeah, of course I'm free this evening. And what he would do is to lay it out on he'd take a room like this and he'd lay it out on the floor and he'd say, no, that's too much crap. We could do that in half the amount of time. If what we did was to bring that scene from there to there, and you'd make the script on the floor of the office, which was fantastically instructive.
Yeah.
Because you saw the thing, again, like the choir singing.
Yeah.
The thing was made. It wasn't a sort of magical, isn't it marvellous that the script is good? It was that some writer had made the script good, or we had changed.
So what was it that you took from working in TV? Did you find that any of the skills you learnt there or lessons that you learnt there enhanced or
writing
in feature films?
Writing. Did you recognise when it was good and when it was bad?
Yeah.
By the time you'd finished with TV and by the time you'd made some TV films, I at any rate felt that I knew what I liked.
Sure.
And therefore could, at least I knew what trouble I was getting myself into.
Yeah.
I got into a lot of trouble because the stuff that was made as I remember my agent saying to me, my very first film, which in fact was an American TV film, but which was liked, and so they reissued it as a movie.
And that was?
Man in the Iron Mask. There was a Man in the Iron Mask.
In the 70s?
In the 70s. Made for NBC and then reissued as a movie.
Yeah.
And I see it's okay. It's something not to be ashamed of. And I remember saying to my agent, I said, Doug, honestly, it's not, I could show you a dozen better scripts on the script editor's shelf at Play for the Day. I mean, it's just not like that. I mean, should I not be sticking with the good stuff? He said, of course you should. Mm-hmm. Of course you should. And I will go on getting you Plays for the Day until we both of us drop off the twig, and you'll never have made a movie.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, fine. And away I went. And we shot it very fast. We shot it in 34 days, and we had a colossal international cast. I had David Lean's cameraman, David Lean's designer, David Lean this, David Lean that. And so I made the transition. Despite myself, I didn't make what I wanted to make. I made what I had to make.
Sure.
And that's a habit that will probably have stayed with me, part healthy, part unhealthy, ever since. Yeah. And it's not exact.
Yeah.
There'll be 60-70% of stuff that I will do because I want to do it, because I have a belief in it.
Yeah.
And then there'll be another 30% that I do because I have to. to think beyond the crash and burn of the last one. They're not.
Yeah. There are so many reasons to do something beyond just liking it as well, you know.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. Somebody said to me, it doesn't matter why you make a movie, just so long as you know why you're making the movie.
Yeah, yeah. I think now you have to kind of forge a voice almost, or forge a style or something that's going to separate you from everyone else. And I think so far I've written and directed, and it's been stuff with young people, kids, or whatever, and it's been quite sweet narratives, you know, nothing too gritty or kitchen sink or anything like that. So the stuff I've been given is along those lines, but there's a couple of interesting scripts, but nothing I've really thought, oh yeah, I'd love to do that, you know. And so it's always a case of, well, should I do one because there's this window of opportunity now where I need to, you know, do something, or should I wait until it's one that I know is going to be, you know, incredible?
Only because that's what I did. I wouldn't wait.
Yeah.
I didn't wait. I couldn't wait. They wouldn't let me wait. My agent very properly said to me, I mean, when I say my agent, I simply mean the guy who had my best interests at heart.
Yeah.
Nothing more than that.
Yeah.
He very rightly said, of course you can wait. Of course you can. And then again, if you wait, who knows whether this is going to come again? You don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's always
That's the danger.
that's the coin that you're flipping.
Yeah.
And in a way, the first movie is such a shock to the system. It's a big shock.
Yeah.
Because what you don't realise is the size of the egos
Yeah.
that are surrounding you. They all know how to do it.
Yeah.
And
what about physically for you? How does it feel to shoot, you know, a big movie over that period of time? What happens to your body and like your mind, you know, doesn't it?
well, I was thin.
Yeah.
I was young, and I was damned if I would not survive.
Yeah.
But afterwards, I wanted never to make a film again, because I thought that I had been tenderized, I had been pounded with a knife. And then after about a year, and I went back and I did television, which I understood very well, and then I started to get itchy.
Yeah.
And so, off I went.
And you mentioned your agent and talking about Play for Today and stuff like that, but what advice would you give? I don't know if maybe it applies now, but when you got your first agent, or are you still with the same agent?
I am.
Yeah.
That's uncommon. It's a good idea to have one.
Yeah.
Because you need all the help you can get, and above everything else, you need an information exchange. You need to know who's doing what. You need to know if there's anything out there that you like. You need to have a serious discussion about whether you should go and do some serious TV to get some flying hours. And none of those decisions can anybody but you make. But boy, it would help to have somebody to talk it through with.
Yeah. Sure. And I wanted to ask about moving into shooting effects stuff, visual effects stuff, because necessarily the first part of your career doesn't really contain any massive visual effects work, and then what's it like to go in to do something enormous and be working with stuff that you can't necessarily see on the day and that you're going to be working on in post?
Well, it's always uneasy, and I have never become easy with it because I'm so much not that generation.
Yeah.
And I've now done 2 great big films which have had huge sequences in them. And I learned a lot on the first one, and was therefore more secure on the second.
Yeah.
But what you will have, no matter how the movie is set up, you will have a guy whose job it is to shepherd you through that. He will be called a special effects supervisor. And he is like a second, or in those big movies, a third director.
Sure.
You get a second unit director who does all the kind of stunt guy stuff. and then you get this guy who will advise you. And it's always good to know as much as you can so that you've got a lot to bring to the table.
Sure.
Because it would be very nice if all of the sequences that you were going, and I'm talking about something that you won't face for a bit, I'm talking about great big fantasy sequences
Sure.
that are simply, all of them CGI. There's one set of effects in the thing that I've just done, which took 18 months from inception to delivery. Actually, probably a bit more like 20 months. And during that time, I was flying blind most of the time.
Yeah.
I worked out with the CG people and with the supervisor, I worked out what the actors had to deliver, what movements they had to deliver, what roughly speaking was going to happen. But I couldn't have told you what the real deal was going to look like.
Sure.
And it is very tricky that you have to sort of, it's just,
Because you
have faith.
Because obviously, as a director, you visualise something from reading it from the page. You start to visualise stuff. Do you find that working with effects, kind of that vision evolves and changes towards the end? Because I've had that, yeah.
Big time.
And you're always satisfied with the way it turns out, or is it kind of like?
Well, I mean, so far, yes, because I have proved myself colossally incompetent at least twice. Once was a sequence from Harry Potter where simply I had to be rescued.
Yeah.
And the visual effects supervisor came along and rescued me. Marvelous.
Yeah.
It just showed me, sort of told me to go and sit down.
Yeah.
And on the other one, there was a sequence that I might have persisted with.
Yeah.
Except absolutely everybody said, this is going to be a pain in the ass. This is going to take forever, and it's not going to be very good.
Yeah.
And so, what we could do, and they then gave me a sort of portfolio of about 3 ideas.
I think one of the questions I really want to ask is about contemplating the value of what we do and having, doing something for your whole life. And do you ever feel guilty about having that much fun and kind of?
Never.
I feel
Never.
like
Not ever.
Yeah.
Which is partly because it is not always fun. It's sometimes absolutely horrible, and very punishing, very humiliating. And if it takes a little fun to balance up that, then fine, have the fun.
Yeah.
It's not a breeze. You don't get to wear nice clothes and have drinks with gorgeous girls and all that kind of stuff. It's mostly sitting on a box in mud, being peed on by all sorts of people. It just is. That's how it's going to be. And at times, it gloriously isn't. But there are huge frustrations built into it.
Yeah.
There's a very simple job description for his trade and mine, which is that you must get your own way. If you don't get your own way, then it's going to look like nothing. And there's nobody's ever going to get their own way completely, not even Spielberg or Shutter Island. Scorsese is going to get his own way forever, of course not. But the more the more appetite the audience has for you, the more you will get to do, to have your own way. And unless you do get your own way, then it isn't going to look like anything. It's just going to be bland.
3D. Was there any pressure to shoot the last one in 3D?
Well, no, there wasn't. And I don't think anybody's going to know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because 3D suddenly, everybody saw Avatar and everybody came away thinking, well, that's it.
Yeah.
There is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Actually, tomorrow is today.
Yeah.
We all got up 3 days later and thought, well, I wonder, is it really? And there will be people, like in this week's Time Out, Mark Kermode says, least favourite film, anything in 3D.
Yeah. Yeah.
you can have them converted. You know, you send them off to a bloke called John in South Korea, and he'll put it in the back of his garage for 3 weeks, and then he'll give it back to you and say, that's the best I can do.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do it really well, you've got to do it like James Cameron, and you know, just look at that. Who's going to do that for you?
I have to admit, when I heard about Prince of Persia, I presumed that it would have been a 3D release. I don't know why, it just seems like the kind of film that would.
It happened before 3D.
Right. Okay.
3D did not exist until November 26th last year.
Right. So when did you start shooting?
A year and a half ago.
Okay.
Well, 2 years ago now. We started in July of we're 10 now, we're 8, 7.
Yeah.
July of 07. So way before. You know, we would hear things about Avatar that simply nobody believed.
Yeah.
It's going to cost that much. Don't be silly. And nobody knew whether Whatnot was 3D was a good idea or not, because we all remember the 50s.
Sure.
Remember the 50s, but you know, whole audiences sitting with dopey glasses on. And I don't think anybody thought that he would make it work.
Yeah.
And by the time it had worked, it was too late for us. We were dubbed, printed, waiting to be released.
To an English filmmaker, I'm 24 years old now, and I have these perceptions of Hollywood. I've never been to LA before. I lived in New York for a couple of months, but I've never got to LA. So what's that allure, that enchantment, that thing we all kind of dream of? What is that actually like, in your opinion, as a British filmmaker?
The best proto-Hollywood joke is "Good morning, he lied." And of course that's absolutely true. It's full of. I never met anybody stupid in Hollywood. You don't get to Hollywood unless you have been filtered into the purest fraction of savagery and cleverness. It's a game. If you don't try and play it, you probably better to speak personally. If I hadn't tried it, I would always have regretted it.
Okay.
Having tried it, my wife thinks, and I think she's probably right, that it's screwed me up more than any other single influence, because there are certain things that it just plain old doesn't do.
Yeah.
You couldn't make all of those brilliant films that we know we can make. You couldn't make Fish Tank. You couldn't make Exit Through the Gift Shop. You couldn't make anything that Shane Meadows ever even dreams about.
Sure.
I don't know, an awful lot. I think it must depend a lot on your personality. An awful lot of my memories are to do with fighting.
Arguments, you mean, or physical?
A bit of both, actually.
Right, okay.
Certainly arguments, certainly treacheries, certainly screaming tantrums, all to do with the job description being get your own way. If you haven't got your own way, then it can't be what you meant.
Sure.
And it should be what you meant.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg will be making what he meant.
Yeah.
And so should you, so should everybody.
Yeah.
But of course they don't give you that kind of respect. You have to take that respect.
Sure.
And that puts a lot of scar tissue on you.